recording. Welcome to Prison Professors. My name is Michael Santos, and today we're going to do an Ask Me Anything with an interesting guy. His name is Michael. I'm not going to use his last name because Michael recently was released from the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and apparently we met while we were in there at some point, not when I was serving time, but when I go into prison. So, Michael, welcome to Prison Professors program, and I'd love for you to just to tell our audience a little bit about who you are, what your background is, and what stage of this journey you're in right now.
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Michael. I worked in the finance and wealth management industry for about 15 years. I was very good at what I did, owned my own firm. I made a bad decision that in the moment I didn't think was bad. And it ended up being a mistake. Instead of owning it, I lied about it. I was sentenced to 7 years in prison. I spent that time at a minimum security camp in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Did about 3 years on that. Went through RDAP, the FSA, all the programs you can think of. I actually heard Mr. Santos here speak at FPC Duluth. He was very inspirational in helping me realize this didn't have to be the end of my life, that I could still have a productive adventure ahead of me. So I wanted to make sure I connected with him right out of the gate.
I'm super grateful to you for connecting with me. Um, and I just want to, talk a little bit about, do you know why I would go to prisons, federal prisons like FPC Duluth? I mean, I've been to like 50 federal prisons, maybe more. But after serving 26 years in prison, why I still go in there? Do you have an idea what the reason is for that, Michael?
And I would think it's to give guys like me hope.
That's like incidental. Of course, it's always helpful to provide hope to people who are going through a difficult time, but the real purpose is to keep people like you from even going in. My real mission and ministry, so to speak, is to really close down all prison camps. If you're in a prison camp, you should be home working, paying taxes with your family. You shouldn't be in there. And that is a big heavy lift to make a change like that. So I go, I have to do a lot of things. One of the things that I have to do is get as many people in prison as possible, figuring out how do I build a pathway to success, because prisons really are exquisitely designed to perpetuate cycles of failure. You're not really in that camp. Where'd you go to school?
I went to University of Wisconsin La Crosse and Purdue.
So went to great schools and built a career. You're going to be able to make it. But most people in prison, as you know, they didn't have that kind of a background, and they face a big challenge getting back into the job market. Maybe not as much in minimum security camps, but in higher security prisons, that's certainly the case. So part of my job is to make sure that people who leave prison are ready to succeed. Because if they're ready to succeed, it makes it easier for me to make an argument to the Bureau of Prisons. This is a waste of taxpayer funds. Not only are you keeping a guy from earning a living, but you're also hurting, do you have children?
Uh, Two, yes.
Yeah, you're hurting those children who are not growing up with their father. And, if a person scores low on recidivism, then he should be in society, in my view. And he should be working and paying taxes and recalibrating his life, because the longer we expose people to corrections, the less likely they are to function. But getting the union and getting the Bureau of Prisons and getting policymakers to see things the way that I see things, it's a very heavy lift. So I go into prisons to try and get people moving in the right direction. I mean, I'm not going to say which prison, but one prison and a staff member specifically told me, we don't like you working to try and change the laws and get people out of prison. We think people should serve every day of their sentence. And, it's just, they're not thinking. In biz dev, and I'm sure this is very familiar to you, there's a difference between focusing on the process and focusing on the result. In business, we
Hmm.
want to focus on the result. Let's get the result that we want. And the result that we want is a safer community with more people living as functioning citizens. The system focuses on the process. Let's lock people up. And then we're doing a great job, not looking at the result. It's creating intergenerational cycles of recidivism, and it hurts a lot of people, and that's one of the big missions that I have and what Prison Professor stands for. So that was the reason that I went there. I'm so glad that you reached out to me. Why don't you tell our audience what when you reached out, what you were expecting to do besides just connect?
Sure. After going through the system, I want to find a way to give back. There's a lot of guys like you, like me, who've gone through this process where it was very traumatic. I was trying to find a way to be a resource, whether that was as a prison consultant. But I have this idea of creating an AI prison consultant chatbot that could sort of remove some of the scum in the industry and, just get objective information out there to help people. Like, it's a traumatic experience. And I think if you can talk to someone rationally who went through it, it can make the world of difference.
That's 100%. And if you spend some time, and I know you, how long has it been since you've gotten out?
About a week.
About a week. And do you have a laptop then, or are you on a phone right now?
I'm on a laptop.
So I would encourage you to spend some time looking around prisonprofessors.org, because I actually built a chatbot on there to answer those kinds of questions. And building a chatbot, it requires a lot of building of retraining, training the chatbot with new questions and new data all the time. And
Hmm.
I've invested quite a bit to build the chatbot. You're right about this concept of prison professors. Anybody can come out of prison and call themselves, a prison consultant. Anybody can come out of prison and call themselves a prison consultant. But that's not always the best use of, for one thing, everything on prison professors is free. I always make three promises to people who visit prison professors. One, I'm never going to lie to anybody. Two, I'm never going to ask somebody to do something I didn't do. And three, I'm never going to charge anybody a penny. So everything is free. In fact, I would encourage anybody who's watching this video to read the concept paper. I make it available right on the homepage and all through the site, because I want people to see what my mission is. To change the prison system is a big, heavy lift. You've got to change Congress. You've got to change employers out here to hire people. You've got to change banks who want to fire people who have a criminal background and won't let them be banked. You've got to change the minds of people in prison. Even in a minimum security camp, there are a lot of people that have a bad mindset and aren't thinking about all of the collateral consequences that are going to follow. And certainly, I would welcome you to become a member of our community and assist in any way possible. But I think at this stage in your life, if you've been away for 3 years, is that how long it's been?
Yep.
And you look pretty young. How old are you?
35.
So you're very young. You're 35. I did this obliterate your financial status while you went in?
Yeah, I had to surrender my licenses. I mean, I had my own firm. I lost all of that.
What was
I'm
your
starting.
earning like? I mean, I didn't get your last names. Like, what were you earning a year at your best year?
It was six figures plus. I mean,
Low
I
six
was
figures, mid six figures, high six figures? Where?
high six
So
figures. I
high
mean,
six
I
figures, and then you come out of prison and you're going to face, first of all, the world's not very friendly to people who have a felony background. Number one. Number two, the world's changing. Where wealth managers is probably one of those industries that are going to be replaced by an agent, an AI agent. And so,
Mhm.
you've got to reinvent yourself as you go through this process, which is one of the big reasons I feel so passionately about wanting to change the system. And
Mhm.
I'm going to remind you, you probably read this before. I certainly not my original thought, but I heard this analogy from somebody before that says, when you go on an airplane and you're flying, if you're trying with young children and the oxygen mask comes down, make sure you put it on yourself before you put it on your child, because you can't help your child if you can't help yourself. One thing I'm going to suggest to you is somebody, I've been out for 12 years now, focus on yourself first before you try and save the world, because it's admirable that you want to give back and that you want to do something, but it's time for you to start figuring out, how am I going to make some money? How am I going to get back on my feet financially and get back to earning mid six figures or high six figures again? Because that's not going to happen by accident. It's going to happen by being very deliberate and intentional, just as it took you to be successful in the first phase of your career. But at 35, you've got a wonderful life ahead of you, but you've got some complications to face first. You've got to finish with the Bureau of Prisons. That's step one. and you don't want to do anything that could jeopardize that. Two, you're going to have
Hmm.
to finish supervised release. And when you're finishing supervised release, you're going to want to build a pathway that's going to accelerate your early termination of supervised release. And then you may want to put yourself on a pathway for reputation. I don't know if your reputation's been obliterated in Google, but you got to start building all of these things, and that is just it is. I can tell you what you're going to feel like, Michael, and then I really want to go. It's really more about doing Q&A. So any questions you have, but I will say you're going to feel as I felt, I think, like you're a G550, you're a jet that's just sitting on the runway without any wheels. So you're useless. You can't get traction. You can't get moving. And it's super important for you to get those wheels so that you can get lift off and get off the ground. Otherwise, it's just sitting there. And it's very easy to get beaten down by, even though you're home, are you in a halfway house now, or are you home?
Halfway house.
So even though you're in a halfway house, you can get beaten down. You can go, you're going to be with people who may not have the skill set to advise you, but they're going to, that's their job. So they got to tell you, well, we think you need to take a class in balancing a checkbook, I mean, and you've got to really humble yourself for that kind of thing. And it won't stop when you finish with a half house. You'll have a similar experience on probation unless you really sow these seeds for something better. But you have a really high education, so I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't know. It's just that it is difficult when you come home, because you want everybody to see you as you see yourself, or as your parents
Hmm.
see you, but they're not used to dealing with a high caliber person a lot of times, and they will reduce the programming to the lowest common denominator, and that's tough. It's a lesson in humility, which you've been going through for 3 years anyway.
Definitely.
So how
It's
can I
it's been
help
a
you? I really want to help you give with any questions that you may have, but
So
yeah.
what is your advice on job seeking? Is it a job, better job, the job? Is it start
So
slow, not
so
trying to look for
for
the career?
any kind of question like that, Michael, it really depends on each individual's status, right? I mean, when I got out of prison, it was different for me because I'd been in for so long, and I'd been preparing for so long that I had like 100 grand in the bank when I got out. So I didn't have a need to take a job, which in some cases can be like another prison sentence. Because if you get a job at a dead end type of job that is going to require you to spend 7, 8 hours, 10 hours a day there on that job, it's blocking you from doing what you really need to do, which is to prepare for the next phase of your life. So just as
Right.
if you would probably be advising somebody who's a wealthy individual in your old career, right? What should I invest in? Well, there's going to be a lot of factors. How old are you? What's your risk tolerance? What are your total assets? Do you want fixed income? Do you want, equity? Right? There's going to be a slew of questions. So if you're going to ask me that question, I got to follow up with a question for you. How would you describe yourself in terms of financial stability at this stage in your life?
Being honest, you get wiped out in this process. I'm starting over.
So does that mean zero? Or does that mean you have gas money? Or does that mean I'm struggling to get bus fare or a car or a computer?
No, I don't think it's that bad. And, I'm very fortunate that I have a great wife who's been with me through this whole process. My parents have been fantastic. So I have a wonderful support system, but it's about, they obviously have concerns. Am I going to put that pressure on myself to be the old me? They want me to take things slow and not end up in the same position again. I think that's the important thing. So it's trying to figure out how I balance that.
So did you go through any of my courses? Did they offer them at Duluth, or was it just I went in there and gave you a presentation and that was the end of their support?
We we had some of your books to read, but they didn't give us any of the actual courses.
So did you ever come across a course called the Straight A Guide, or Preparing for
Mm-mm.
Success After Prison? It's a shame because that's a First Step Act approved course, and I give it away for free even if they don't buy it. But let me explain it to you, because I think it's super important for anybody. It was very important for me. And it really requires you to probably do what made you successful in other areas of your life. And you got to start by defining success. That's like the first step. What is success for you today? Because if you've got support from a family and you've got support from your wife, I think the first thing that you have to do is really like lay out a plan for them. And that plan is going to be based on what are your assets and resources. I'm not going to ask you to tell me because only you know. But your closest support group can only be helpful to you if you're totally honest with them. So, like when I came home, I told you I had been preparing all the way through my journey. So I had 100 grand in the bank when I got out. And I remember telling my wife, because I got married while I was in prison, and we'd been planning and building, for 10 years. She would visit me in prison and we were planning. And I told her, I said, it's very important for me to be financially successful because I know that this is what I want to do, but there's no money that comes from this, right? There's no money from prison bringing things to help people in prison. I have to pay money. So because I had that in mind, I'd set this goal. I said, I want to have my first $1 million within 5 years. And so I said, I'm going to build a case to get that million. And that case is not because I want to go live a very affluent life. It's because I'm going to need that level of capital to build what I really want to do. And then I need to grow that level of capital so that I don't ever have to rely on income. So I had capital, access to capital, because I had my own, and then I could persuade other people to invest alongside of me. Okay.
Sure.
If I would have done the opposite, and I had to understand my strengths and weaknesses, right? I'd never had a job. I'd been in jail for 26 years. So I didn't have anything. And so I thought, I'm never going to get a traditional job. I got out much older than you. I was nearly 50 when I got out of prison. And I felt I am unemployable. I mean, I could get a job, but I'm unemployable in the sense of being able to get out there and really get ahead. I have to figure out a way to make my own income stream. And so I had to come up with a plan. And my plan, I wrote about it in Earning Freedom, but my plan was very methodical and very intentional. And that's what I would really recommend that you do, is start by defining success for you. It's going to be different than it was for me. I didn't have 2 children. I didn't have a PhD. I didn't have a work history. I'd never sent an email when I went to prison. So I had to learn everything and buy everything because I didn't have anything. I had cash, but I didn't have a computer. I didn't have a pair of shoes. I didn't have a car. And I didn't know how to do anything in tech. So I had to learn everything. But because I had a plan and I knew how to define success, I could work through a series of very intentional goals that would accelerate my pathway to getting there. And for me, it was in real estate. I started off buying real estate, and just because with real estate, it was just a matter of I want to own appreciating assets and appreciating markets. I got out at a time. There was a great time to be investing in real estate. It was a better time to be investing in Bitcoin, but I didn't know about Bitcoin because we didn't have access to computers in prison. So I didn't even know what it was. But real estate was great because it was the end of the recession, and it was a great time to be buying assets that were going to grow in value. And that's really what got me started. But you're in a different situation. You have 100x more knowledge than I have about markets, number one. You've got a story, and you've got to build your personal brand and your personal story. That's what I would recommend. But you're going to need support. Like sometimes it makes sense to go to those people who love and support you and say, look, here, I did this course with a guy who did a lot of time in prison, and he told me about, every decision is an opportunity cost. And it really is. So when you ask me to go, what kind of job do you want? Do you need a job? Because some people go and get a job because they have to have a job for the halfway house or to get home passes, but they don't really need $18 an hour. Okay. If you're going to go earn $18 an hour, but you're a high earner, a high net worth guy, well, you're worth $500 an hour. And so you got to figure out, okay, I need to get through the halfway house, step one, and then I need to have the ability to build a case so that I have a high level of liberty on supervised release, and then get off of that. And this is a 3-year plan. So, I would depending on the amount of support that you have, I would include everybody in that body of work, and then say, let's create a body of work so that in 2 years, I don't know the length of time you have remaining. How much do you owe to the BOP?
About 10 months.
10 months. So that's not terrible, right? So I would have a 10-month plan to get through the BOP with the highest level of liberty you could possibly have. And then how long is your supervised release? 3 years?
5 years.
Wow. They really gave you a lot of time. So I would have a plan
Hmm.
to get off of that within 2.5 years. Okay. Because that's a reasonable plan. It'd be nice if you could get off in 2 years. You can. I got off in 1 year and I had like 30 years of supervised release because I was under a different sentencing law than you. Um, but you can. But I think it's more difficult for you than it was for me because I had done so much time in prison. So I think you've got to set realistic goals. Step one, finish with the BOP so that you never go back. And it's easy to do, Michael. It's much easier to do than they will tell you. I have a friend who was in the same situation that you were in. He was in the halfway house and he ate a bagel, and you've probably heard these kinds of stories before. But this guy looks just like you, also has an education, was a biz dev guy, and the bagel, he didn't even order the bagel with the poppy seed, but they cooked the bagel in the same pot. And it came up in a urine exam, and they couldn't wait to send him back to prison. So he'd been in the halfway house for 5 months, and he had to go back to prison, and he lost the year of RDAP and did another, I don't know, it was terrible. It was a terrible burden for him and his family. So you've got to be super intentional and really understand the complexities of where you are. Because there are some people where, in your situation, that it's in their interest to send people back.
Hmm.
They're driven by that. And it's our job to just make sure that you're saying they're not going to get me.
Hmm.
That's just how it is. You've got to be super strong and super intentional and have a plan. But with regard to what job you should get, I would start by saying, well, how much money do I have to earn? Because if I don't really need to earn money, then I would say don't earn money. Take a job that gives you time, because time
Okay.
is super valuable. You're going to need time to lay out this 3-year plan. And the most important thing for you at this stage in your life as such a young man is going to be your liberty. And you've got to get to the point where you have 100% liberty. You're done with supervised release so that you can get on an airplane anytime you want and go anywhere you want. And you've got to navigate that. And since you're interested in AI, I would recommend that you use my website, prisonprofessors.org, because everything is free and I publish every single day. And crawl it, build an agent, learn from it. And if you have questions, ask me questions, because I would love to answer those questions for anybody who's in prison, because we pipe this into like 1 million people in prison. And through these tablets. You don't have them in the federal system, but a lot of places have it. And so I want people in there learning what do you have to do? You have to start laying out a plan right now. And so, I just think time is way more valuable than $1,000 a month.
Okay.
If you got
No,
the
that's really.
resources. That's why I said, if you don't have the resources, then I'm going to give you a different answer. Right. But this is like a family investment, right? You're part of a family and your mom and dad are vested in it. Your wife is vested. Does she have a career?
Yep.
Does she,
She's got a great job.
so she's vested in it. And then you've got 2 children, that are going to be vested in it, because there are mental health complications that can come with it if you don't get the right profession, right? If you don't fall back in, you start saying, oh my God, my life is over and I'm depressed. And, there's a lot of mental health complications that can come with it. So it's super important to be the CEO of your life right now and figure out, okay, I need to come up with a plan. Okay, I need to, make sure that I put priorities in place. And based on what I've understood from you, and I don't have all the answers, but from what you told me, priority 1 is not getting a $15 an hour job. It's coming up with a really good plan. So you got to set priorities, and then you've got to build your tools, tactics, and resources, just like you did when you built your company, right? You had to build. And that's valuable, because if you build all of that and all of that's built by the time you're finished with 10 months, you're going to be in a much better position to persuade your probation officer to let you pursue this path. And you could build a body of assets and work that you might sell to others. Certainly, there is a great opportunity right now with the way that the world is changing with AI, although I think you're very behind in AI because you've been away for 3 years. So, 3 years ago it didn't exist, and now it's existing. You're going to have to learn a lot. Fortunately, it's pretty easy to learn. Even a dumb guy like me can learn. So you could learn AI, and you could, I don't know your experience with blockchain but these are other areas that are just on fire and enormous opportunities for people that can learn about and teach. And I think
Okay.
that's way more valuable. But maybe you have other questions.
I think the other question I would have for you is just, is it okay to kind of have that nervousness that, I'm a felon now, like people aren't going to look at me the same. I mean, I get a little bit of freedom to go for a run and I feel like everybody's staring at me like they know this about me now. And it's how long do you think it takes to get past that?
Well, I think it's different for every person, and I don't think you'll be like me. But I've been home from prison since August the 12th, 2013, and I still dream about prison. I still have dreams of going to prison. It's different though, because I was a prisoner for 9,500 days. For 26 years, it was a big part of my life. Number one, I mean, you probably weren't even born in 1987, were you?
89, nope, 2
Yeah.
years.
So I went to prison before you were born, and I didn't get out until 2013. So it was a very long time for me. But it's not only that. Look at my career. If you look at prisonprofessors.org, right, it is filled. It just shows you. It's in my head all the time because I left all those people behind, and I feel like a real obligation and a responsibility to try and teach people how do you grow stronger. So in my case, it's still very much alive, but it's a strength for me, Michael. It is not a weakness. The first thing I say to people is, yeah, Michael Santos, I was in prison for 26 years, right? And the way that you phrase it and the way that you present it is the way people are going to receive it, right? I can speak about it from a position of strength. I made a lot of really bad decisions, and I've worked really hard to rebuild and recalibrate and reconcile with society, and my life is very public. So I would encourage you, check me out, see what I do, right? And I can't tell you how many deals I've made happen because of that. Okay, not little deals, $1 million deals, because people are intrigued with that. And I think that when you have, I like to say the one thing you have in common with the president of the United States is you both have a mugshot. So, it's not quite the same thing it was before, right? I
Uh,
mean, the prison system
sure.
is terrible, and we have to like humanize it and say, if I don't know your position on it, you might say, I should have never gone in. You might say, no, I made some really bad decisions. I think that's what you started off saying, right?
Hmm.
So, like, if you own it, right, any person can make a bad decision, but not every person can recalibrate and rebuild. And that's how you restore confidence. And I would really encourage you to learn about others who have done so. So, like, if you haven't, have you read Earning Freedom?
Mm-mm.
Conquering a
No.
45-year sentence. So it's on Amazon, and you can get the audiobook if you want. Listen to it while you're reading. But it's this story of how did I go through a quarter century in prison and use every day to prepare for success. But then, if you just look at the website, you will see how I do every day, make money and build. And I don't need a paycheck. And I don't want a paycheck because I make my own money, and I show people how. So, like, I would encourage you, like, look at the accountability log on prisonprofessors.org. That's the way that I say to people, I never ask anybody to do anything I didn't do. Okay. I show what do I do every day. There's a way that shows that how do I make money? I make money trading. Doing exactly the opposite of what a wealth advisor would tell me how to do, right? I'm a degen speculative. I take big positions in concentrated positions, and but I'm very public about it, right? I don't give financial advice to anyone. In fact, let's say right at the top of that, don't look to me for financial advice. I learned to survive in prison, and I have a different skill set than other people because I was in there for so long, right? But you could do that, Michael. You could build your path. Would never advise anybody to build my path, but I would definitely say every person has to be the CEO of his life. And that's what I try to help people figure out. So,
Okay.
like, look at the accountability log look at my info. Look what I do. If you look at that founders page, you will see on there that I documented all the influences that, not all, but there's like 50 or 75 of them on there at different eras of my journey. Reading the Bible was a start. Then, my family, then Socrates, then Frederick Douglass, then, Nelson Mandela, then, all these people, they helped me get through prison stronger. There's a great book. You probably don't remember. I'm sure I referenced it when I was at your prison, but it's by, I forgot the guy's name. But it's What Got You Here Won't Get You There, right? The decisions that get you to one stage in life should only open an opportunity and prepare you for the decisions you make to get to the next stage in your life. But I would just really encourage you, be focused on results. And the only results that matter are the results that Michael wants to achieve with your wife and your family. I was very blessed to have a supportive wife. I got married inside of a federal prison, and she did 10 years of that sentence, just going from prison town to visit with me. So an incredible woman. But the only reason we succeed, I think, and we've been married now for 20, I'm going to get in trouble, I don't remember, 22 or 23 years. But I will tell you, the only reason we succeed is because, we have our strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. She's very clinical. She's a nurse, not a risk taker, right? And, I'm who I am, but I'm very open and transparent with her. So this is what I do. And this is how I'm going to define success. And I want you with me on this journey. And if you want to be with me on this journey, this is how we're going to build a great life. And it's how we've done it. But she's on board. She understands, I grew up in a very unusual environment of, in solitary confinement and high security penitentiaries and medium security prisons. And my whole focus was I wanted to come home and be able to walk into any room and nobody would say, I ever served a day in prison. The difference is I tell them, because I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud that I built a successful career despite being incarcerated for so long. And I want to help other people do the same thing or learn how to do the same thing, but primarily because I want to take their stories, that's why I said be on an Ask Me Anything, because I think other people will want to hear it, but simultaneously, I want to persuade legislators and policymakers and administrators and employers why we need to change the system to keep people like you from going in there in the first place. I mean, it's absurd to think you're going to still be under the thumb of bureaucrats for 3 or 4 more years. It's a waste of taxpayer resources. And we need mechanisms to change that. And that's what Prism Investors is really aspires to achieve.
Okay. Well, this was really helpful. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
I'm going to write a lesson plan around it, and I'm going to publish on the Ask Me Anything thing because it'll become part of our course of curriculums on how to be the CEO of your life. So you'll see it. It'll be published by tomorrow, I think, or the next day. But do you have any other questions?
No, this was wonderful.
Okay, so let me stop the video. And if any of you want to be on Ask Me Anything, it's very simple. Just go to prisoninvestors.org under courses and you can apply. Be cool.